those $400,000 kickback, officially approved by an Argentine judge, were generated by one of these two organizations, the DAIA, the Asociaciones Israelitas Argentinas, which at that time was presided by Mr. Rubén Beraja, who was the president from 1991 to 1998, who was later jailed because he too had a bank, Banco Mayo, which went fraudulently bankrupt and which stole the funds of mostly Jewish citizens in Argentina. Shall we say, Rubén Beraja is our own local version of Bernie Madoff on a much smaller scale. And this Rubén Beraja, just so that we understand how these networks work, in 1996, 1997, he was part of Paul Volcker's. Remember Paul Volcker, the governor of the Federal Reserve before Alan Greenspan? He had set up a committee of eminent people, eminent persons, to investigate the Swiss banks for having kept money belonging to Jews during the Second World War, and they ended up piping up and paying Jewish Zionist organizations $1.4 billion. Well, Mr. Beraja was one of those eminent persons, together with Ronald Lauder, the billionaire, together with Israel Singer, the Secretary General of the World Jewish Council. We'll get back to Mr. Israel Singer in a few minutes. Clearly, birds of a feather flock together. And there you have Mr. Beraja, who provided the money for the kickback so that a court would be able to falsely accuse an entire institution and foreign countries of participating in this dreadful terrorist attack that affected Argentina. Local Zionist organizations like the AMIA itself, the DAIA, the Argentine Zionist Organization, the Israeli Embassy, the United States Embassy, major media outlets insist on blaming Iran, Hezbollah, and other Islamic organizations and countries. A short time after the attack, local journalist Jorge Lanata made an extensive investigation, and he found that there was absolutely no witness who was on the street on that day that recalls seeing a Renault van, that recalls seeing a Renault van go by, and much less that recalls a Renault van ramming into the building and blowing it up. You see, they need the van to exist no matter what, because if it doesn't exist, then this would lead to a totally different scenario. And it ties in marvelously with what at that time, the scenario I'm going to tell you about, were the ongoing internal fights in the state of Israel itself and between different sectors of the Zionist organizations. You had the left-wingers with the Labour government, when Labour was aiming at some sort of peace agreement with the Palestinians. You remember the Madrid conference, the Oslo Accords, and so forth. And you had the ultra-right-wing fanatic Nazis in the Likud and later in the Kadima and the Israeli settler movements. I'm talking about your Ariel Sharons, your Avigdor Liebermans, and Mr. Benjamin Netanyahu, who was Prime Minister in the 1990s and is again Prime Minister of the State of Israel, all naturally supported by the United States of America. An Argentine investigator by the name of Norberto Ceresole prepared a brief timeline that lets you understand why the AMIA attack of July 1994 fits in so perfectly with the internal fights within the State of Israel. He said, look at this. In 1991-1992, the Madrid Peace Conference started, where we started talking about giving the Palestinians a state, formally a state, and already a group, a ultra-right-wing group, the Coaxed group, started carrying out a series of attacks within Israel. 17 March 1992, the Israeli embassy is blown up in Buenos Aires, and Israeli negotiators were meeting at that time to start to see how they can go forward with the peace agreements. Luckily, they went down to have coffee themselves too, so they were not killed. 13 June 1992, General Yitzhak Rabin from the Labour Party was elected Prime Minister of Israel, and amongst the other things that he did, he totally revamped the Shin Bet, which is one of the internal security forces in the State of Israel, who is supposed to take care of public officers in Israel and public Israeli buildings abroad. He totally revamped Shin Bet and gave it the mandate to investigate the settlers groups within Israel who were becoming increasingly violent and very well armed. In 1992 and 1993, Israel and the Palestine Liberation Organization, the PLO, formally negotiate and recognize each other. This was Yitzhak Rabin's merit. You all remember when Yitzhak Rabin and Yasser Arafat, with Bill Clinton behind them, shook hands. Rabin wasn't very happy, but at least he was doing his best to try and see if Israel could overcome or come to peace with the Palestinians. That's when all the attacks started in Israel again against the Labour government. 25th February 1994. Now I don't know how many of you remember this, but an American Jew by the name of Baruch Goldstein went to Hebron in Israel, and whilst a large group of Muslims were at prayer in a Hebron mosque, he took out a machine gun, started firing, and killed 40 Muslims whilst they were praying. The question is, how did he get through very thick security, Israeli security? He got through somehow. Somebody must have winked an eye at him. He was killed in that by the Palestinians in that terrible attack, and yet his tomb in Israel is a place of worship for the settler movement in Israel. February and March 1994, the Cairo agreements start fixing the borders for Gaza and for Jericho. The peace movement and the giving to the Palestinians their own state keeps moving forward. 1st July 1994, after 27 years in exile, Yasser Arafat returns to Palestine. 18th July 1994, oh surprise, the explosion in Buenos Aires city of the AMIA Jewish Mutual Organization, which at that time was pro-labor. The right-wingers definitely didn't like them. And when does this whole dreadful process of internal fights in the state of Israel come to a head? 14 months after the attack against the AMIA, when on 4th November 1995, Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin is assassinated during a public event in the streets of Israel by a university student by the name of Yigal Amir, who was linked to Shin Bet and who was linked to the settler movement, ultra-right-wing activist. The Israeli Shamgar Commission, who has investigated the assassination of Prime Minister Rabin, concluded that Shin Bet was implicated in the assassination, even if by omission, but they had a responsibility. After this, after the death of Rabin, I think Shimon Peres stayed on for a couple of months, but labor was ousted, and from 1996, 1997 onwards, power in Israel, political power, has been in the hands of the Likud, the Kadima, and now again the Likud, ultra right-wing nationalist parties, fundamentalists, racist parties. That's why, since then, Israel, the United States, and the Zionist organizations insist permanently that the AMIA explosion had to be done by Iran, Syria, and Hezbollah. They insist that there was a car bomb, even though no car bomb was ever found. They need to accuse Syria, and notably Iran, which country, Israel and the United States, are desperate to put together now a case so that they can have an excuse to unilaterally attack Iran. Especially now that the atomic program, the nuclear program, the parts don't fit so well. All Argentinian governments since then have bowed down to the United States, to the State of Israel, and to Zionist organizations. President Nestor Carlos Kirchner and his wife, who is now the president, who have both usurped power through the use of badly received money, kickbacks, public money stolen by them, have been totally functional to the Zionists and to their objectives since May 2003 when they came to power. And look at this. On 22nd September 2006, then President Nestor Kirchner was in New York City to address the United Nations General Assembly. There was a private, secret meeting at the Waldorf Astoria where then President Nestor Kirchner participated. His wife, at that time First Lady, today the present President of Argentina, Cristina Kirchner, participated. And the foreign minister at that time, and also today, Jorge Tayana, participated. And they met with the key Zionist organizations, the World Jewish Congress, the American Jewish Committee, the B'nai B'rith Masonic Lodge, the Anti-Defamation League, and they reached some sort of secret agreement. We don't know what it was, but in October 2006, just a couple of weeks later, then President Kirchner sends public prosecutors Alberto Nisman and Martínez Burgos to the United States to meet with CIA and Mossad authorities. Upon their return to